Now the mic is totally broke.
Here.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And now, you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Now is the time to adopt the agenda. Would there be a motion from the council? Motion to adopt by Drew and a second by Jones. All in favor of adoption of the agenda say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, this takes us down to non-consent items, starting with item number 1. Again, thanks for being here tonight. I think the air conditioning shut off on us. So here's a summary of what's happening tonight. A citizen group, the Home Rule Committee, will present their findings and conclusions from the past year's work. No votes will be taken tonight. Nothing will be approved and nothing will be disapproved. It could be that some of you have been told home rule would be approved tonight, and if that's the case, you were misinformed. I would like to introduce the Home Rule Committee members who are present tonight. If you could wave your hand. First, Alan Dietrich. Alan Dietrich's a retired attorney. He's worked as an attorney for Northwestern Corporation for 27 years, 16 of those years as a corporate officer. He was a second judicial circuit magistrate judge in Sioux Falls for 8 years, and he's lived in Rapid City for the past 7.5 years. Chris Orr. Chris Orr and his family have lived in Rapid City for 20 years. He's a forensic meteorologist, but spends much of his time working to build bridges between Jewish people and Christians. He was a TV news anchor here for 6 years, a columnist for the Rapid City Journal, a community education instructor, editor of a financial newsletter, and a public historian specializing in political theory leading to the American Revolution. He served on the Rapid City Water Task Force from 2003 to 2007 and was an environmental commissioner for a suburb of Minneapolis from 1995 to 2000. Don Frankenfeld. Lifelong Rapid City and forensic economist Don Frankenfeld was the leading economic expert testifying on behalf of September 11th victims. Frankenfeld was a state senator and chaired the tax committee. He has served on several nonprofit boards and was a Bush Foundation Leadership Fellow. Dr. Jared McIntaffer. Dr. McIntaffer is president and CEO of Benchmark Data Labs. He came to the project in 2017 from a Pennsylvania State University, where he taught several economics courses. A South Dakota native, Jared received his PhD in economics from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in 2015, where he co-authored several labor market and workforce studies while working with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Bureau of Business Research. His research fields include program evaluation, economic forecasting, human capital formation, economics of education, and regional labor force development. Jason Green. Jason is an associate general counsel for Monument Health. He previously served Rapid City for more than 10 years in the city attorney's office. Mr. Green currently serves on the board of Black Hills Federal Credit Union and on the financial committee of Wellfully. Linda Lee Viken. Linda is the owner of Viken Family Law Mediation. She is currently a member of the Chamber of Commerce Board, Zonta, American Association of University Women, and Starting Strong Advisory Committee. Linda Lee served in the state legislature in Sioux Falls for 4 years, then moved to Rapid City and served in the legislature for another 4 years. She taught civics for 6 years to middle school and high school students. Lynn Kendall. Lynn is the Military Community Relations Director for the South Dakota Ellsworth Development Authority, where she works to connect and create support services and opportunities for the military members and families stationed in Rapid City, South Dakota. Her passion for military service, community development, and collaboration allows her to bring people together to meet the needs of our military members. Mike Hickey. Mr. Hickey is a lifelong resident of Rapid City and has been an attorney at the Bangs McCullen Law Firm for over 43 years in the areas of employment law, education law, and litigation. Michael Nelson. Mike Nelson was born and raised in South Dakota, is an Air Force veteran from Flandreau, South Dakota. He moved to Rapid City in 2014 to pursue a degree in industrial engineering and engineering management from South Dakota School of Mines. He is currently a senior who has decided to make Rapid City his home for the foreseeable future. Patrick Wiss. Pat Wiss is a landscape architect and urban planner with such regional design projects as Memorial Park, Mount Rushmore National Memorial Grounds, Elkhorn Ridge Resort, Hart Ranch, and many others. Mr. Wiss is past chairman of the Rapid City Chamber of Commerce and is a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects. Tamara Peer. Tamara is a former city attorney for Rapid City and has been involved in a wide range of community activities. She has served in various former city administrations under mayors Carlisle, McLaughlin, Munson, Shaw, and Quaker. She currently serves on the Friends of South Dakota Public Broadcasting Board and the Cornerstone Foundation for the Cornerstone Rescue Mission. And scheduled to be here tonight, but absent, is former Mayor Ed McLaughlin. He was prepared to be here tonight, but he's suffering from a sore hip. He's waiting for a hip replacement, and so he sends his regards, and he is saddened not to be able to be here with you. So, here's my involvement in this process. I spoke of home rule and city manager first in my 2015 mayoral campaign. I spoke of it again in 2017 when I was preparing for a possible election campaign at that time. I brought it up again in 2019. So I initiated it in late 2019. I asked the council to approve a committee that would investigate home rule. During the time I spoke of it in campaigns and after being in office, I never promised that I would sit on my hands and wait for instructions. In fact, I promised the opposite. You can probably find sound bites of me all over that say I'm going to work hard. I'm not going to sit around. There's a lot of work to do. I have articulated my reasons for being interested in home rule and city manager as noticing a pattern of diminished interest in people running for public office. There's a general disinterest in governance, a general lack of involvement. I think it's fair to say a general lack of trust. Voter turnout is poor, and it gets worse. 2019 at the city election, the voter turnout was 19%. And in a busy community, the other voters are not forfeiting their input. They are overcommitted, overwhelmed, underinterested. There's something that makes them unable or unwilling to go to the polls, but that lessens our obligation to them by nothing. We have the same obligation to a non-voting citizen as we do a voting citizen. So I see this poor turnout and the general lack of involvement as a threat to our way of life and our investments in our community, in our children's future. So tonight during the presentation, you're going to hear of the general advantages of home rule. Since I'm not a part of that presentation, I'm going to tell you what what seems most important to me is the Home Rule Charter. The Home Rule Charter is very similar to what you might say is a local constitution. It is a document that is controlled and approved by the people. It places the authority directly and expressly in the hands of the people and those who represent them. The core tenets of home rule governance can only be changed by a vote of the people. We don't have that now. It also provides consistency, but also flexibility. So you're also going to hear about the general benefits of a city manager tonight. Again, the most important advantage in my mind is the professional management component. There's a high degree of qualifications required for a city manager. City managers, in that professional development, I think is something very important to cities like ours. Professional management as opposed to political management. You might say that a city manager is an operations manager. Someone in charge of the operations of the city. The 12 departments, everything that from the budgeting of those departments to the execution of the long-range plans and the strategic plans. But operations management is the part that requires skill, education, and experience. Operation management is where the most money can be saved or lost. And it's also where managers have a professional network of other city managers across the country. And lastly, the city manager works for the city council, who are elected by you. So I think we would agree on something. Shouldn't the people be in charge of the government? I think we all agree with that. And by the way, it's about time we start finding our common goals and our common values in our communities. But yes, the people should be in charge of the government, but it's difficult to imagine that when we have a noticeable and documented lack of involvement with the government. The people deserve assurance that the government is going to have their best interests in mind, and this cannot be guaranteed with elected musical chairs and random and changing priorities from term to term. I see that as a threat given all the other environmental conditions. So we owe it to the people to give them the best chance of good and responsible governance. So why was the Citizen Committee initiated? It was initiated to get a cross-section of the community thinking on the issue, to have a non-government investigation of the issue, and to get fair representation, some from each ward of the city. And there's no secret that I believe in local control. I think the close relationship that the constituents have with their mayor and council is unequaled in public service. The local government is closer to the constituents. And if you'd like to follow me sometime, I'll show you what it's like walking through Walmart or one of the other public places in town. It's quite the situation for having face-to-face contact with constituents. So local issues should be vetted by local community members. Local control to me, is a thinking person's government. It's free of the bondage of party lines and predetermined outcomes. Not all of our problems in communities can be solved by the party handbook. It just won't happen that way. Home rule is the people's rule, which is ironic, because the opposition calls themselves the people's rule. I mean, there's no better name for it than that. Home rule is where the rules are made at home. So, how does a citizen committee operate? How do we get a committee together to go through the last year and to be here tonight? Press attention is created through press releases and maybe follow-up interviews. We do social media releases to let everyone know that we're looking for committee members. Sometimes it doesn't take, and we have to repeat it a number of times to get sufficient interest. Then an application process is held for potential committee members. Now, typically, applications are vetted initially by the mayor and then sent to the council to be ratified. But in this case, the council got to vet all of the committee members from their wards to choose who represented their ward. Then a general information session is held, and we had one in-person meeting with this committee right before the pandemic. There was all 18 or 19 of us in the room. We set the boundaries, we empower the committee to do the investigation, and inform them how to gather resources. And then the committee needs to be protected by undue influence of the mayor during their time at work. The committee presents a finding or proposal to the city council, and that's what's happening tonight. So how does the mayor keep from influencing the committee? First of all, constant disclaimers by me. Every time I meet with this committee, which was only a couple of their meetings on Zoom, I have to go through this thing where I tell them, I'm not part of your committee. If you think I believe one way or the other, you're to disregard that. You have no marching orders other than to find what the best option is. They'll all recall hearing this kind of thing from me multiple times. Then, next is arm's length support. I'm not there in their meeting room with them. I'm not nodding or shaking my head no or giving any kind of signs. I'm doing something else. But when they need support, such as administrative work, typing, or phone calls, or meeting setup, or any of that type of thing, we provide that support. And a professional facilitator. That keeps us out of it. Now that has become controversial in this case as well. Not other cases, but in this case. So I would like to give a special thank you to the Home Rule Committee tonight for attending dozens of meetings and looking at each other on a screen. Having now to date, we've had a couple of, or at least one in-person meeting since the pandemic has eased a bit. But I'd like to thank these members for giving their time and talents, taking your free time to engage in city business, and for enduring the criticism. It is not fun. I can tell you as an expert target of criticism, it is not fun. I think I got a little thicker skin for it, but I know some of you probably don't. So I admire you for being on this committee. I think this committee is a blue ribbon committee. I'm very impressed with the quality and the backgrounds that we have in these committee members. So, home rule and city managers are legal options for cities. They are spelled out in South Dakota state law. They're legal. Yet we have two state legislators who have become organized in their opposition. I don't get that. Without any phone calls, without applying for the committee, without any kind of one-on-one contact. I don't know why the opposition seems to have an aversion to letting the voters take up this issue. 3 years ago, I was standing right here at the same podium asking the City Council to take action on the new arena for the Civic Center. And right behind me, one of the opposition members said, don't do that. Don't take action on it. Give it to the voters. If you trust the voters, let the voters decide on it. That's the way it should work. So that's the way it should work with an arena, but nothing else. See, I'm confused. And frankly, I mean, I'm a human. I get a little testy. I'm not immune to getting upset. I'm not immune to take some things personal. And after a year of having prowlers at my house, and all kinds of threats and innuendos and accusations of everything from criminal misconduct to ethical misconduct, I can get defensive just like everybody else because I'm human, flesh and blood. So I'm a little bit defensive. Other cities who have adopted home rule are Aberdeen, Beersford, Brookings, Elk Point, Faith, Fort Pierre, Sioux Falls, Watertown, and Springfield. There are also 5 cities who have adopted a city manager. Those are Brookings, Watertown, Yankton, Vermilion, and Sturgis. So So folks, we're here for a presentation tonight from the people who spent a year with their heads buried in this issue and are going to enlighten us about how they got here, what they determined, and why. And no action will be taken tonight. No vote's going to be taken tonight. So thank you for being peaceful. Thank you for being good citizens, watching. I know some of you are upset. There's a good way to be upset. One of my latest things is that we're losing our public decorum. We're losing decorum in our public meetings. I think that's a bad sign. So I would just like to thank you all. I think it's a very orderly meeting. Come every single time if you want. This is your meeting too. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Linda Lee Viken.
Thank you, Mayor Allender, and members of the council for this opportunity for us to see in the dark. Opportunity to do what we were charged with doing. Coming up with research, figuring out whether home rule and/or city manager should play a role in this city, and to come to you and tell you what we've done, what studies we've made, what conclusions we've drawn, and why we have drawn those conclusions. To do this, we're going to first give you some information about background of what we did as a committee to gather information. You'll see as we go through this that I'm going to ask members of the committee to come up and do these various slides. And when we get to the charter committee, or charter part of our committee report, they will also do that. Because I want you to see them and hear from them, because I can tell you that the committee was an active committee. Everyone participated, everyone listened to each other. We would make choices based upon our various findings and research. And so we're proud of what we have to offer you tonight. I also want you to understand that even though there won't be any decision made tonight, of course, we will be here to answer your questions. And it's important to us that there be public hearings so that the public can have some input. We had hoped to do that ourselves, but the pandemic made that impossible for us. So we hope that you will continue to have the public involvement just as they're going to have tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here with our Home Rule Charter Committee report. So if I've learned how to do this, I'll get you the next slide. Being a teacher of 8 years before I was a lawyer, and being half German, I like rules. So here you are. Here's my list. You know, a good speaker says, first I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So here's what I'm going to tell you. We're going to go over all of these kinds of things for you. And this chart has sort of a concise listing for these. So what I've asked the members of the committee to do is to put some meat into that. Tell the council what we did and how we did it. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. And Lynn will come forward and tell you about it.
Good evening, everybody. Lynn Kendall. So as you can see on the slide, May 2020, this council appointed our committee, and right away we got to work. And everybody knows, May of 2020, we were knee-deep in navigating COVID. At a time when a lot of community groups were taking a step back and not meeting, we found a way to do that, to continue the conversation, because we were committed to following through with what this committee charged us with doing, and that was understanding home rule and its potential implications for the community of Rapid City. So kudos to this committee, to this group of volunteers. As you can see, it's comprised of a broad group of backgrounds and experiences related to city government. Each person came into this open-minded with the intent of working on behalf of the citizens. We had many meetings. We sought out many resources across the state, and internally we dug deeper into the inner workings of city government. We learned a lot, and we're excited to talk to you tonight about it. I really feel like we did our due diligence, knowing that right now is really the start of the conversation. We hope to give you a foundation upon which to build from. We came in with an open mind. I think all of us had some kind of basic understanding of the conversation, but nowhere near the expert level or what it would look like in Rapid City. So it was definitely a learning curve. There was a lot of meetings. There was a lot of subcommittee meetings where we took deeper dives into more specific topic areas and had a lot of really great thoughtful conversations on the many different aspects of this topic. I don't feel at all that we were ever influenced. I'm pretty proud of, like I said, the thoughtful conversations that we had, and you know, back and forth too. People disagreed, people agreed, and we were able to really talk about impact in a way that mattered for the citizens.
I just asked my group that you just call up the next person when you finish. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Tamara Peer, and I've been asked to talk about the research we did as a committee in studying both. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry.
One more. Right here.
Okay. In the background research we did regarding looking at home rule in other communities, at different forms of government. We were also provided some documents that were from the National Civic League regarding charter commissions and how we should proceed, and also a sample model city charter. At our preliminary session, we had the chair of this Pennington County Commission, Gary Drews, speak with us. And he just gave us a basic outline of home rule. His background was that he had been the mayor, he'd been on the city council in Pierre, and then it was mayor for 12 years when they adopted home rule. So then we went on and we had went to Brookings, and we had their city manager give us kind of a background of what he sees as basically the pros of a city manager type of government. And one of the big things he talked about was the ethics that they are provided or are supposed to be abiding by, and also that. And their training, the background and training that they have as a city manager. Also, we heard from one of the charter members there, and he had been involved in it because he was an entrepreneur and was interested in better, more efficient government, and had been on that for years. From Watertown, we had another Home Rule Committee charter member, Kyle Lalim, I think is his name. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly. And he really talked about, one of the highlights that he talked about was the fact that you could have a very nice person elected as mayor, but they will have no background in being a CEO of a multi-million-dollar business or government. And that the city manager provides that basis for running a budget and running a operation like this, so that the mayor can do their more political policy work. From Sturgis, we had their city manager talk to us, and interestingly, they don't have home rule, but just a city manager. And Vermillion was also another one of our cities that we spoke with. There, they were in the process of approving home rule. They hadn't at that time, and so we spoke with one of the members of their home rule commission and 2 council members that had been involved in that. They talked about their research, and basically they said that home rule, or they were recommending it not because of any specific need, but just because the need for flexibility and being able to kind of customize your government more to the needs of the people. Then I think one of the most interesting conversations we had was with Dusty Johnson. He graciously made time for us, Representative Johnson. He had been a co-chair of the Home Rule Committee in Mitchell. And he has a background, a training as a city manager. So he talked about the fact that it didn't pass there. And why he felt that had happened. And he thought they had been overly aggressive, had tried to include too many types of change in their charter, and had a local business person very actively opposing it. Ultimately, that person, they went on and a year after they voted this down, or the city manager form of government, they hired a city administrator. And the person that opposed it said that he had seen then that there were many savings for having a city manager type of government, and that he felt that he had probably taken the wrong position on that. After all this, I think we then, looking at all the pros and cons of this, we then broke into groups and we started drafting a home rule charter. Because we had come to the consensus that that was an appropriate way to proceed. And one thing we wanted to talk about is that this is just a draft proposal. And unfortunately, I think because of the Zoom meetings, we didn't have more public input, and that's one thing I regret. And so now we hope that this is the first in many meetings where the public will hear about this proposal and have input on it. Thank you very much. Do I have to do? Oh, I think I did 2. Did I do 2?
You want a bunch.
Okay. I'll let you do it.
All right. Mike Nelson, and here I'm just going to talk to you guys about exactly the whole process and how it works. One thing I want to remind everybody is that we were all chosen by the City Council to form this committee, and then we all got together, and some of us knew what home rule was relatively decent. I personally had no idea. I knew it was different than whatever we were currently doing. So I was very interested to see what that meant. What is that? We spent a very, very long time, probably the first at least half of our commission, just learning what is home rule. What are its benefits? Are there any drawbacks? Who else has it? Let's talk to them. We talked to all of these different people from all these different cities. And they all gave us their insights, how it worked for them, how it helped their cities, how it could potentially help their city if something catastrophic were to happen, emergency things of that nature. But the first order of business for our whole commission was just to see, is it even a good idea? And if it wasn't a good idea, and we all came to a consensus about that, we would just stop right there. After we learned everything that we could about home rule, we decided it does sound like a pretty good idea. So then we move forward to where we start to work on the charter. And then after we develop our charter, through lots of different help from different avenues, we sent that to the city attorney to review it. And that is only a draft. Everything that we have up to this point is just a draft, completely up to the council and mayor to modify it if they even approve to go forward with it at all. So we're right here at this middle part where we are presenting to the council our draft and hoping that they approve it, because we worked really hard on it and we all really do believe that what we have to offer is the best way to go forward. If they do approve it, then they will consider modifications, and they could change, you know, maybe it's a different number of council members. Do we just do home rule without a city manager, with a city manager? It all completely depends on what you guys do if you guys want to approve it. And then from there, whatever the council puts out goes to everybody else to vote on it. It's going to be a whole citywide issue, and the citizens get to decide if they want to go forward with home rule, with city manager. And that's pretty much that. I'm going to give it over to Jason.
Thank you, Mike. Jason Green. And I know you're shocked that the lawyer is going to talk about Dillon's rule. But before I get to that, I want to mention something. In 1986, in a very famous dissent, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia wrote, "The imperial judiciary lives." And the context of that statement was in a case where he felt that the Supreme Court was overriding the political will of elected officials. Scalia said, the imperial judiciary lives, not that it was born. And if you look at the first bullet here, in 1863, we have a judge-made rule of law. Judge John Dillon stating that municipalities are mere tenants of the will of the legislature. And if you look at the last bullet point, you can see in 2002, our own Supreme Court here in South Dakota parrots that back. Without home rule, local governments have only the authority specifically granted by the state legislature. So what does that mean in practice? I think the best example of that is the idea of an ordinance prohibiting animals running at large. If the city council determines it's not a good idea for people to let their dogs run at large, and they want to enact an ordinance that says you can't do that, there had better be a statute somewhere that says municipalities may regulate animals running at large. And it turns out there is. That's Dillon's rule. Home rule flips that around. Home rule allows a municipality to take any action that's not otherwise prohibited by the state. So, in essence, the municipality that adopts a home rule charter no longer has to ask permission from the legislature, from Pierre, to take action. The two bullet points in the middle outline South Dakota's history with adoption of home rule. There was an effort in 1957. It finally is approved by and incorporated into the Constitution in 1962 with revisions in 72. And finally in 1974, the legislature at that time enacted some statutory rules around home rule. One of those legislators is here with us and served on our committee, Linda Lee. So with that, I'll turn the next slide over to Don.
I'm Don Frankenfeld. I, like others here, applied when I saw in the newspaper that there would be a home rule committee, and I was frankly surprised to be appointed because I had been a strong Sam Quaker guy when these two people ran against each other, and I'm pleased to see that Mary Allender doesn't hold grudges and was trying to get a diversified group of people, not a group of just yes men or women. And I trust that that is what, in fact, he got with our committee. I think that home rule is a conservative's dream. I think that the reason it is that it empowers the citizens, in this case the citizens of Rapid City, to control their own destiny, rather than to have their destiny specified for them under the yoke of government. It makes a great deal of sense, I think, to trust the people. That's kind of the principle upon which this democracy was founded in the first place. The Home Rule Charter, as the mayor said, is something akin to a constitution. The Constitution also has a Bill of Rights, and we should look at that. The Bill of Rights, in this case, would be looking at what might go wrong with a home rule form of government. Can something go wrong? Yes. And the legislature has specified a whole lot of things that my friend Alan will be talking about in a minute that protect us from abuses. So we've got freedom and we are protected from abuse. I had a real interesting time talking to a few of the folks on the other side of the room today, just before we started. I thank you first for the civil conversation that we had. And it occurred to me as I was listening that talking about home rule in a general way, as we are, is a little bit like saying, I like pie. Well, yeah, but doesn't it matter how the pie is made? Doesn't it matter what goes into it? Of course it does. There are lots of different ways to make a pie. I've seen my friend Jordan talk about what he perceives, I guess, as some of the difficulties with the Home Rule Charter, but many of those things are a different pie than we've been talking about. He even refers to the American Legislative Exchange Council, which does indeed summarize Home Rule versus aldermanic rule. It doesn't take a position. It doesn't say that Home Rule is bad. It does say that Home Rule can be abused if there aren't proper safeguards. And that's good advice, and we've tried to take those proper safeguards. So more flexibility, more freedom, more opportunity for the citizens of Rapid City to do what they believe is the right thing to control their destiny in this town. That's the essence of democracy. And I've already specified that there are some things that we need to protect against. And Alan will talk about that.
To advance it, it's just this. Okay. Alan Dietrich, Ward 3. As they've said, Home Rule kind of turns things around. Instead of authorizing, having to look for specific authorization to do something, a city can do anything that is not prohibited by its charter, the state constitution, or the general laws of the state, in other words, the state statutes. Here are some bullet points of things that are specifically prohibited in the Home Rule chapter. First one, enacting or increasing any taxes or fees or charges unless already authorized by state law. Certain taxes are authorized by state law. They can enact no others. And one of the other things that is a true favorite of most people in the state is the initiative or referendum process. Home Rule cannot deny an initiative or referendum on ordinances or bylaws. There are other limitations here that you can see for yourself, but in summary, the city council is given great latitude to enact things unless they are specifically prohibited. And following me is Jaron? Yep. Oh, it's under somebody else.
Jared McIntyre, thank you for having us here today to explain the work that we've done with the Home Rule Committee. What you've just heard is some of the limitations, the things that Home Rule cities are not allowed to do. No, unauthorized taxes, no changes about many different things. But Home Rule does allow for the city to make some changes that relate to its constitution, if you will. We've heard that phrase. So when it comes to that sort of local constitution, the way you want to structure your local government, the two big things really are how do you want to think about the legislative branch, the political branch of the local government, and then how do you want to think about the executive or the administrative branch of the local government. So this slide that we have here just sort of summarizes some of those issues. And I will say these were some of the issues that were discussed at great length by the committee. As was told earlier, we spent the first few months just learning about home rule. We didn't even get onto the issue of, do you like home rule, do you not like home rule, what should home rule be, until we were several months into this process. There were no polls of the committee, there was no sort of lobbying. It was, let's learn, and then after a few months, that's when we started talking about some of these issues that are on this screen. The South Dakota Constitution defines what the city council should look like, right? The aldermanic form of government, the representation from the wards, those things are outlined in the South Dakota Constitution for municipalities. Under home rule, the citizens would have the ability to alter that. They would have the ability to craft that sort of local legislative body in a manner that suits that community the best. So that was the big discussions that we had, I think, over many meetings, several meetings, a lot of back and forth from committee members about this issue, because it really is at the core of the home rule question, right? So what's the size of the city council that we think is good? Should we continue to have a strong mayor where the mayor is the chief administrative officer, right, of the local government in charge of managing the departments and so forth? Do you want to keep that, or have a weak mayor, or have a city manager? So those were a lot of the discussions that we had. You'll see in the charter, the committee sort of coalesced around the idea of having a 7-member council and moving to a city manager form of government. We're going to talk about that a little bit later when we get to the charter thing, so I'll leave some of that discussion a little bit. But I do just want to impress upon the city council that this was, I think, the area that the committee spent the most amount of time on, where there was the most back and forth and disagreement and debate, and then ultimately coalescing and coming together around an idea that the committee thought was a solid way forward and could provide a good way for Rapid City to manage its affairs going forward in a responsible and, I think, cost-effective manner. Ultimately, our recommendation should be cost neutral. As an economist, someone that cares about numbers and things, that was important to me and many other members of the committee. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to, what do we have? Mike, you go next.
Good evening, Mike Hickey. I'm from Ward 3. First of all, I want to thank the council for taking the time to listen to us tonight. I think it's important, when I was selected to this committee, I applied because I didn't know what home rule was about, and I thought it would be a very interesting and learning experience for me. I had concerns, to be very candid, about city managers, because I thought that's another layer of government, and I don't believe that we need that. And at the first meeting we had, I specifically asked Mayor, what if this committee says, no, home rule is a bad idea? And he said, that's fine. If that's the decision of the committee, I'll live with it. And I think, true to his word, he did not try to influence us. He gave us information when we requested it, and so to say that we're the product of the mayor, I think, is really unfair. After many meetings with, I think, a very talented group of people that I have a great deal of respect for, I came to the conclusion that I think home rule is a good idea. And I think home rule with a city manager is a good idea, and I think when we get into the specifics, you'll see that we're trying to make that revenue neutral, so it doesn't cost more to have a city manager, and yet we can get some efficiencies in the operation of the city. I've been asked to speak about some examples of how home rule would work, and you can see them, they're up there. I think that it's important to note that any of these things that ordinances that are adopted, any of the things that ordinances that may be adopted would have to be adopted by the council. The city manager does not have the authority to do that. The mayor does not have the authority to do that. All of that responsibility is vested in the city council. An example that we shared in the committee was the city of Rapid City for a number of years was attempting to use credit cards to pay bills. Unfortunately, the South Dakota legislature didn't specifically allow that. And so the city had to go and get specific approval from the legislature. As you know, the legislature only meets once a year. And so for a period of time, you're hamstrung because you need to go to peer to get permission. And frankly, I think the community, the leaders of that community should decide, we think it's more efficient to pay bills by credit card. We shouldn't have to go to the legislature to ask their permission. Another example that we learned about was a community that allowed restaurants but didn't allow restaurants to sell alcoholic beverages. Again, that community was stymied because they didn't have the specific authority from the legislature to do that. This would allow the city to enact things that they think is in its best interest without having to get legislative approval, provided the legislature doesn't prohibit it. Another example of an area where we believe that an ordinance would be helpful is in cybersecurity. There isn't a state statute that deals with that. But if we had home rule and we believed that that was a concern, this council could pass ordinances dealing with that. Under home rule, the city has the ability, however, to make more stringent rules than that allowed by the legislature. I think in the area of billboards, in the area of marijuana, potentially marijuana, and in the area of regulating adult-oriented organizations, this council would have the ability to make more stringent recommendations or ordinances. Like, for example, under adult-oriented legislation, there's a South Dakota statute that basically prohibits that type of entity to be within a quarter of a mile from certain educational and religious institutions. The city, if they decided that that was too broad and they wanted to restrict it even more, could do so. And I think this council, I think in a case that you're all familiar with, actually tried to do that. And that power remains. You can still do those kinds of things. I think the quote there from Bob Freeberg, I don't know, he's a lawyer in Beresford, at the bottom there, basically explains why home rule is a good idea and should be carefully considered by this council and by the community. And it's going to be put to a vote, provided that the council approves it. And it's basically, this deals with future events, emergencies. We've recently had a fire here that threatened a number of homes. In those kinds of situations, this council would have the ability to pass ordinances, adopt ordinances, emergency ordinances and things like that to address those concerns. And so that's a big reason why I've changed my view, and I believe that home rule will work for this community, that it's good for this community, and it's something that you should all carefully consider in your deliberations. And with that, I will turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you for your time.
I'm back at the podium not because anyone wanted me here twice, but because former Mayor Ed McLaughlin wasn't able to make it. And he was going to speak a little bit about the duties of a mayor under a city manager form of government. Obviously, as a former mayor, he's a little bit more qualified and experienced to speak on this topic than myself, but I'll do my best. Under the proposed charter that we have, the mayor would become a member of the council. So the mayor would no longer be the chief administrative officer of the city managing the departments. The mayor would be an elected position, elected at large, and would serve as a voting member of the council and would be the presiding officer of the council. The mayor would not have veto power. He would essentially be, it's a trite phrase, it's a little bit cliche, but he or she would be the first among equals, right? No additional powers other than the ability to cut ribbons at various events, right? So that would continue. The other thing that we have to consider with this role, and this was a thing that we talked about a lot, is if we have a city manager, and I know that's a concern that a number of people have expressed, that it would add another layer of bureaucracy and cost, right? So if we were going to propose to the council a city manager, we wanted to think hard about what is the then role of the mayor, because it did not make any sense to have the mayoral role continue, certainly at the same salary level that it currently is, given the reduced duties, and having the mayor essentially being a council member. So it's certainly not the role of this committee to recommend any sort of pay scale decisions to this council, but under our considerations and the way we had thought about this, the salary of a mayor under the proposed form of government would essentially be equal to that of any other council member. Perhaps a little bit more to cover the additional duties that the mayor might have as sort of the face of local government, right? So that was a big consideration for us in keeping this proposal cost neutral and not having a significant impact on the budget of the city, at least in terms of pay for council and mayor and things like that. So, and we can certainly speak more to that later. But with that, I will pass it on next to Pat.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Wiss, and thank you for hearing our committee's report this evening. I'd like to go over the organization changes that we would recommend to move to a city manager type of government. The chart we have here is what you have now. The citizen voters elect the mayor and the city council members, and the voters are in charge. And under the current form of management then, all the department heads report to the mayor, an elected official. And keeping in mind the total list of qualifications for that role to head up all those departments is to be a resident of Rapid City and to be at least 18 years old. That's a total list. And so we looked at this, we studied this at length, and I'm going to refer back and forth just a bit, but under the proposed, the citizen voters are in control, as they are now and as they would be under the city manager structure. And the voters elect the mayor and the city council members, just as they do now. The difference then comes in the organizational management once the political leaders have their jobs and they hire their managers. Under the proposed form, the city manager, the city attorney, and the city finance officer would all report to the full city council. So it actually empowers the city council beyond what you have under the current form. And then the remaining department heads report to the city manager. And I've heard the city manager referred in various ways. I can tell you one thing a city manager is not. They're not some kind of dictator that can just run with an iron fist. They're a city employee that's hired by the city council, the elected officials who remain in control. The city manager is in many ways like a chief operations officer. And the department heads then would report to a civil servant employee who would be your city manager, who works at your pleasure. And those are really the big changes, and you can see the voters are in control. Now, And under the current form, again, the citizens really control the leadership. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Linda Lee at the next phase.
See, now you get to see these people that we've been working with all this time. As you can see, they're all engaged, they're all interested, and I hope that our little backgrounding, we didn't want to take too much time, but we wanted you to understand that this was a serious task that we undertook, and that we really were interested in learning and having discussions. And I would echo what the other members have said, that the mayor was not taking a position. He didn't vote on anything. If he was at a meeting, he never spoke unless spoken to. So if you're concerned about that, don't be. This is our choice that we have made. What we're going to do at this point now is we're going to move forward and have the members explain to you the charter. We know that, we're sorry to know that you didn't get the charter very early and you didn't get as good a chance to look at it as we had hoped you would. We will probably be a little more informative than we would have been before when we thought you had read it all. But if you haven't had that opportunity, please understand that we are always ready to come back and answer if you want us at some other time to answer your questions about it. I would ask that you do hold your questions so that we can have those at the end, only because sometimes you might have a question that gets answered in another part of the charter. But if you have your charter with you and you see something, put a circle on it and you can come back and ask us about that, because we would like to be able to be sure that you understand why we recommended what we recommended. So with that, I will move to my chart who says who's doing what with the charter. And I don't think we have the charter on here, so someone can tell me how to shut this off. I don't think they put it in. We didn't really ask them to, so. Are you going to help me out, Chapin? Oh, good. Thank you. We didn't talk about this, but, we have to be innovative when the time arises. While we're waiting for that, I would tell you that many things in the charter you'll be familiar with. They are already things that you do and that are already part of the makeup of what we would call a charter as to the background for the operations of the council and the mayor. So I think those you won't have much problem with. We'll try to point out the changes that we have made so that you understand that and that you're going to ask us those questions. So with that in mind, I don't know how we get to the first one, but so I'll just wait here. No, I was just wondering if they're going to put it on the screen. I have mine somewhere.
Will this identify it if you double click on it? Mouse.
I think they're going to put it up. This is really because I forgot to ask them to do this, so don't mind me. Our charter looks like this. And the entire document is only 16 pages long. And we go from the powers of the city to an article about the city council, to the city manager and an explanation of what it would look like, to the role of the departments, the officers, and the agencies. It addresses financial management, the election process, has some general provisions that one has to always have, addresses how to amend it, and the transition that would take place. Each of these sections came about as a result of looking at what other people in other cities have done, the research that you've heard about, and our discussions. What I want to do is I want to make sure that you understand what it is we're proposing. You've been told several times that this is our recommendation. It is your duty to decide whether you will agree with that recommendation, and we hope you will. But in the end, you make the decision whether you accept it, whether you change parts of it, and of course then you'll send it to a vote. Once you make your decision on that, you have to send it to a vote within a year. So you have some deadlines after that. Just so it's understood that also citizens have the right to initiate a request for a city manager and or for city rule, or for both. So that's the process that it will go through. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. You notice how I've conveniently kept myself out of most of this? All right, who's our first person here? Looking for my chart. Powers of the city is Alan. So, yep. There you are, right behind me. I'm going to take this. You can pass it on to the next person.
Okay. Good evening again. The items I'm going to cover on the first page of the draft charter. The first is the preamble. This is a statement of the intent of the city to adopt the charter. It also affirms the values of the city: representative democracy, professional management, strong political leadership, citizen participation, diversity and inclusiveness, and regional cooperation. So it's kind of like a statement of the mission of the city and what it's trying to do with its charter. Okay. Then Article 1 is talking about the powers of the city under this charter. 101 is a broad statement of the intent to have all of the powers possible under the Constitution and state statutes. I talked about this earlier on the limitations. It's a broad statement that the city would have all powers that aren't prohibited. 102 says that the powers that the city has should be liberally construed. In other words, they shouldn't be narrowly defined by anybody reviewing them. 103 just says that the city is free to participate in other governmental, intergovernmental activities as they do under all forms of government. And finally, the 104 are the limitations that I talked about earlier, those things that are specifically prohibited by the Constitution and state law. Of course, if the state legislature passes new restrictions, we would also be subject to those under the 101, which says that we have the powers that aren't prohibited. So that's essentially a restatement of Article 1. The next area is the City Council, and this is Lynn and Chris.
Hi, Chris Aware. Thank you for hearing us tonight. Under Article 2 of the City Council, you'll see Section 2.01, the general powers and duties. That's the same as you currently have, or we currently have here in the city. Section 2.02, eligibility of terms and composition. Paragraph A, eligibility is the same as we currently have. And then B, terms, is the same that we currently have. And then C, with the composition, again, this is where we had a lot of meetings, a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, and working on getting a consensus. But our goals were to have a balance between representation and functionality, and also the goal of being cost neutral. And what we came up with, or what our consensus was a 7-member city council 6 members, and then the mayor, and keeping all 5 wards. 1 member from each of the council wards to be elected by the voters of those wards in accordance to a later article that we'll be covering, Article 6. And the mayor and 1 member of the council will be elected by the voters of the city at large for a full city representation. And also, with the exception of the council member elected at large, not more than 1 council member shall reside in each ward. And so that's what we came up with, and again, everything is editable and can be figured out. So, Lynn?
Hi, so section 203 outlines the powers and the duties of the mayor. This committee recommends a mayor elected by the majority of citywide voters, like it is now. However, the recommendation is that the mayor would be a voting member of the city council and recognized as the head of the council. Their role would be, like this says, to preside at council meetings, represent the city at community functions and intergovernmental relationships, recommend advisory board appointments that are then confirmed by the council, and then other duties as the council determines and sees fit. The mayor would be, in this recommendation, the mayor would be part-time and not have administrative duties. Like we've said before, this shifts those administrative functions currently held by the mayor to a city manager supervised by the council that we'll dig into in the next section. This does specifically here in compensation state that the compensation is determined, of the mayor is determined by the council. I'll turn it over, Chris. There's a lot of stuff here within the section. Sorry, this isn't so easily read, but a lot of it is driven by state law and really tracking current processes as far as some of the smaller details on prohibitions of holding office and things like that. But here, Chris, I'll turn it over to you to get into some of the vacancies.
In section 2.06, things are a little more detailed than what we currently have. Paragraph A describes vacancies and what those vacancies might be from office, and also the forfeiture of office. This particular paragraph is more specific than we currently have in the structure of our city government. And then in C, we have the filling of vacancies. So that the wards can be properly represented, if there is a vacancy, the city council shall fill an appointment, fill an empty position with someone from that ward. And they would be appointed to serve out until the next annual municipal election. And if that's within, is less than 60 days away, then it would be the next municipal election in the following year. But we want to make sure that those wards are always represented in this particular case, because the way things roll, if there is a vacancy, then the city council can fill that vacancy with somebody from the ward that is suffering.
I could interrupt, Lynn, I could interrupt just for a second. We've been having some technical difficulties, but I do think we have this document pulled up on a better, maybe more readable version.
You didn't like the yellow?
Yellow is nice, but.
It's like too much to pay attention to.
Yellow, that's lime green.
Oh, thank you. I know where.
Maybe someone knows how to get rid of that green pencil thing there.
Page 4.
I'm using the mouse and up one more, or down, sorry. Next page. Here, we'll just do this. Yeah. So the next section in, or paragraph that I want to point out in section 2 is with emergency ordinances. This is a change. So the purpose of creating a home rule charter is to create a governance structure that is nimble and efficient, while also being transparent and accountable. With strong local control around a structure that encourages deliberation and engagement without prohibiting action at those critical times when that action is needed. To that end, we have suggested in this charter provisions for an emergency ordinance process that would allow elected leaders to declare an emergency and respond quickly through ordinance to address that emergency. The emergency ordinance or resolution may be adopted at the meeting it was introduced rather than have to go to a second reading. And then to maintain those checks and balances that we talked about, that we really wanted to put emphasis on throughout this whole process, any emergency ordinance that is enacted is automatically repealed after 60 days. So that's section 2. I'll turn it over to the next presenter for section 3 and stand by for questions afterwards.
All right, so section 3. The mouse was turned off. I'm just gonna turn it back on. Maybe it's dead. Okay. So section 3, this just talks about the city manager. It talks about the appointment qualifications, compensation, removal acting, all that kind of stuff. So what we really want to get into is the city council appoints the city manager with a majority vote. And then they determine the compensation of the city manager at that point. I really want to stress that the city manager will be chosen solely based on education and experience and the accepted competencies and practices of local government management. The manager does not need to be a resident of the city initially when hired, but will then need to reside inside of city limits unless the council decides otherwise. They serve entirely at the whim of the council. And no elected member of the governing body, the council, the mayor, etc., will be eligible to be city manager until at least 1 year after their term is expired. And we'll go down to 3.02. City council and the city manager will develop an agreement covering the terms and conditions of employment. The city council shall fix the compensation to be received by the city manager, and the compensation may be amended from time to time in accordance with the city manager's experience, qualifications, and performance. The city manager will be evaluated at least annually by the city council to determine if they are still a good fit for the city. The removal process in 3.03 goes over exactly how you can get rid of the city manager. The city manager shall be appointed for an indefinite term but may be removed by a majority vote of the elected members of the governing body, i.e. the city council and mayor. The termination procedure shall be in accordance with South Dakota codified law. And basically what that law says is it goes over the whole process for how you then remove a city manager. You have to give them a letter of intent at least 30 days before you expect them to vacate. And the city manager at that point can ask for a public hearing, which you would have to give them at least a chance to see why, what's going on, why do you want to get rid of them, did they do something wrong, all of that good stuff. Down to section 3.04, we get into the acting city manager. Whenever a vacancy occurs in the office of city manager, the council shall designate an individual to serve as the acting city manager until such time that the council can appoint a permanent replacement. Council members, including the mayor, shall not be designated as acting city manager. They're not allowed to hold the same office of their elected official and then city manager. They can't do that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to finish up section 3.
Thank you, Mike. Section 3.05 is one that is probably of great interest. These are the powers and duties of the city manager. And as you look through this list, I think what you'll notice is that it largely tracks the duties and obligations of the mayor under the aldermanic form. What's important here, though, is that the city manager is directly accountable to the elected officials for carrying out all of these functions. The city manager doesn't have independent authority to create ordinances or do anything like that. The city manager is bound to carry out the directives of the city council. So all authority is ultimately vested in the elected political leaders of the city under this charter. Sections B and C address the standard provisions that exist in state law for city manager governments. The idea is that the elected officials deal with the city manager deals with the employees. You don't have crossover between those two. Next article, Article 4, gets to departments, offices, and agencies. And in 4.01, you'll see that the creation of city departments is vested in the council. The council decides what departments are going to exist in the city. They will be directed by the city manager, but ultimately whether a department exists or not is a question for the council. We've deviated just slightly from the typical system here in that we've added the city attorney and the city finance officer as reporting directly to the council rather than reporting directly to the city manager, and we were very intentional about that. The elected officials should have direct control and direct oversight over the individuals who guard the public purse and those who carry out the enforcement of ordinances or do other legal work on behalf of the city. The city council is the client. The city attorney should report directly to that group of people. That's what would happen under this chart. In addition, there's provisions for the city council to establish a personnel system to ensure that the city manager doesn't act arbitrarily and capriciously in dealing with employees. That will be under the control of the city council as well. Land use, the city manager was designated as the chief land use official, again accountable directly to the council. And 4.06 is something that probably should be more explicit throughout all local governing bodies, and that is that if an officer or public servant is required to keep or preserve any record or document or instrument that's subject to the South Dakota open meeting or open records laws, they're obligated to do that and to make it available for inspection by any person during normal business hours. So there's clear directive in the charter to keep public records public and available to citizens. And with that, I will turn this over to Donna.
Excuse me. I have the financial management section, and it's not that it's unimportant, pretty important, I think, financial management, but pretty straightforward as well. So there's probably not too much that needs to be said. Expenditures will continue to be made as they have been with an annual appropriation. No expenditures without that appropriation. And the council is prohibited from appropriating funds in excess of those reasonably anticipated to be received from tax revenues, so no deliberate deficit spending. How do I go down here?
Down arrow, this one right there.
Thank you. Provisions here for emergency appropriations, not removed from the way it works right now. And appropriations can be reduced if circumstances warrant, and under some circumstances can be transferred from one fund to another. No appropriation for debt service may be reduced or transferred except to the extent that the debt is refinanced. So as I say, pretty straightforward, I think, and not far different from what we're doing now.
So, okay, I'm as illiterate as Don is when it comes to computers. Okay, thank you. I'm here to visit with you about Article 6, which is elections. You've previously heard that it's the recommendation of the committee that the council members, the numbers of the council be reduced to a total of 7. 5 would be elected from the existing wards. 1 would be elected at large, and the mayor would be elected at large. We've got a handout that I'll just leave with, I'll leave with the council that basically just kind of has a schedule of what we had discussed and what we were thinking might be appropriate. Thank you. Which one is that? This one? Is that? I can't see. This little guy right there. Oh my gosh. I can't see that. Basically, the election section incorporates existing South Dakota law with respect to the eligibility of the candidates. Like I said, in section 602, it's the 5 city wards. The council has the ability to redistrict, and with the new census, you will have to do that in any event. It follows the state law with respect to the initiated process and referendums and what have you. There is a new section, section 603D or B. It's on recall. To my knowledge, there is no current recall provision in your ordinances. This would allow for the citizens to recall a specific council member. I think there's a 6-month limitation. That would be a new section. The other thing that I think is important, that it keeps all of the existing structures with respect to how elections are held, the eligibility of elections, the timing of elections. All of those things are governed by state law, and the council wouldn't be empowered to make things more liberal than those state law. However, for example, I don't know what the rule is for political contributions for city elections. This would allow, if the state statute applied and set certain limits, you would have the ability to make more restrictions if you all believe that that was in the best interest of the community. Again, those would all be council decisions. They would not be made by the city manager. And I want to add one other thing that's really not, it's off topic, but I just feel I want to comment it. I've heard some rumors that people think that the current mayor wants to be the city manager. I can tell you one of the things that he specifically told us is absolutely not. He said he's not qualified to do that. He doesn't have enough experience and education, and I believe the man. And with that, I will sit down and thank you for your time.
I'll be discussing Article 7. I left my notes up here. Here we are. Article 7, the general provisions, hold on a second. Yeah, I'll be page 12. Page 12. Sorry, I left my notes on the podium, so here we are. So Article 7 addresses conflicts of interest, and essentially the use of public office for private gain is completely prohibited. And then we go through specifics of defining that. We also recommend a board of ethics that would consist of non-city council members, and then we list out certain criteria there. And we also have certain activities that would be prohibited, and such as a non-discrimination clause, and to a prohibition against knowingly making false statements, and shall not self-promote for your own personal financial gain as an elected official, and to not solicit personal gain, and shall not receive any contribution from any political party. We keep it as a non-political process. And we do list penalties and also have a full disclosure recommendations so that all elected officials would have to disclose various aspects of their situations. So, and with that, then we'll move on to Article 8.
So if you pass this charter, how do you amend it? Basically, this covers those issues. And it allows for the city council to to propose an amendment by ordinance. It allows that, and then it would go to election. All these would go to election. By report of a charter commission created by ordinance, and this is very common in the home rule committee or communities. They'll have a commission that will review the charter. Some every year. I think Sioux Falls is every year. Watertown does it it used to do every 5 years, and now does it every 8 years. So they could do that. And interestingly, this, and I think this is very important, is 15 qualified voters can go ahead and propose this. They would initiate this. They would take it to the city city clerk of city finance office. And then they would be given a petition. They would have to go out and get signatures of 10% of the people who had voted in the last, the registered voters in the last election, the last gubernatorial election. So, quickly. And I don't know who's doing 9. Okay.
Before I take the last section, I've asked Jared to come up and talk to you about the handout, since he put it together and explained it, so it makes sense to you. Do you need a copy?
So one of the potentially confusing parts of the charter, especially when you first read it, is the transition, right? So the committee is recommending a 7-member council going forward. There are currently more than 7 members on the council. How does that transition take place? What do the election cycles look like? So in the current document, proposed charter, draft charter, we have a situation where if the council decides to move forward and put this to the vote, and the citizens then approve this charter, again, this is a draft that can be modified. If the citizens adopt the charter, then at the next municipal election, we would start implementing the change. So all 7 council positions would go up for election. All 5 wards, plus the single at-large member of the council, and then the mayor. So all of those positions would be up initially at a single large election. And then we would proceed in a staggered fashion, right? That would cost a lot to do all those elections in 1 year, and it would be very hectic, so we don't want to do that all the time going forward. So the chart that's provided for you just sort of illustrates what that section in the charter looks like. The proposed method is that wards 1, 3, and 5, those council members would serve an initial 2-year term, and then there would be an election for wards 1, 3, and 5, the odd-numbered wards, and from thereafter, those council members would serve 3-year terms. Wards 2, 4, and the single at-large member would serve an initial 3-year term and then continue as 3-year terms thereafter. The mayor, owing to his or her special status as the presiding officer of the council and the sort of face of the community, that position is a little bit different. We have that as a 4-year term for the mayor. And so we initially have this sort of staggered thing And you can see, especially in the chart that's kind of like an Excel table, where there's actually just some years listed at the top that are all proposed and potentials. You can see the sort of pattern of how the elections would take place over the next, I think this has like 14 years, 15 years going forward, what that would look like. So if there's any other questions how to read this thing, I'm not a graphic designer, so I hope that it doesn't confuse the issue more than it potentially is already. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Well, I got the first word, now I get the last word. So I'll talk to you about the last section, Article 9. Obviously, there's a transition that has to take place because of the things that are suggested and recommended in our charter. So there's a whole section dealing with that. I'm going to go through it with you because I think it's an important section from the standpoint of the people who are working for you now and you yourselves. The section 9.1, yep, it's up there, isn't it? Nothing in this chapter, except as specifically provided, shall affect or impair the rights or privileges of persons who are city officers or employees at the time of the adoption. Except as, B is except as specifically provided by this charter. If at the time this charter or any amendment thereof takes full effect, a city administrative officer or employee holds any position which is or can be abolished by or under this charter, he or she shall continue in such office or position until the taking effect of some specific provision under the charter directing that he or she vacate the office or position. Now, in reality, we haven't suggested to you to abolish departments or positions, but this is a standard kind of provision in a charter, so that if you take actions, these people will have the protection that is allowed in this section. The personnel system, you remember back in the previous section there was a discussion of a merit section in 4.02. This indicates that an employee holding a position, and Richie, you especially want to listen to this, at the time of the charter takes full effect, who is serving in that same or a comparable position at the time of its adoption shall not be subject to competitive tests as a condition of continuance in the same position, but in all respects should be subject to the personnel system. The next section deals with the transfer of powers, but again, this says if a city department officer or agency is abolished by this charter, and we do not anticipate that unless you make some changes to what we propose. Otherwise, they remain in place. Of course, you have properties and records in the departments. Again, I don't think that this is going to be a situation that you really have a lot of concern about, but I think it's important for you to know that we have this in here. Whoop, that was a little too fast. Okay, how do I back this up when I want to do that? Oh, okay. Thank you. See how much we help each other. This is why we work together well. Any pending matters in section 903, any pending matters like contracts, proceedings that are in place, those continue on. The section 904 talks about the state and municipal laws, and it says that any resolutions that you have in place are not going to be affected by anything unless you make a change in it. It says that they are repealed to the extent that they are inconsistent with this charter or ordinances or resolutions adopted under it. So unless you decide to do that, then this won't be a concern for you, but in addition, you do have resolutions, you do have municipal laws, and so I want you to be aware that you want to look at this section and see how it affects you. The schedule, of course, is blank because the first election We don't know when the first election is going to be. That will be filled in when you make your decisions. And it doesn't take full effect until after the date and time of the first meeting of the newly elected city council. And because of that, there's also a section on temporary ordinances, so that if you need to act in the meantime, you will be able to do that. And also it provides, of course, for the expenditure of funds as necessary. And last but not least, the severability provision. For those of you who are not familiar with that, and I expect most of the council members are, it means that if at some reason it is determined that something in this charter is invalid, the other provisions will remain in effect. I know that we've kind of hurried through some of this because of our time constraints, but I hope we've given you an overview that's understanding to you. We believe that what we are recommending to you is in the best interest of the citizens of Rapid City. We hope that you will give that earnest consideration, and we will be happy to provide more information to you should you need that. With that, I assume that we can open for some questions at this point, Mayor, and I assume it should be directed to you, through you at least. And what we will do is that whichever members of our group can be able to answer you will come up here. It might be more than one. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you all for the presentation. Just for clarification, we'll have questions now from City Council members. We'll not be taking questions from the audience. So any council members wishing to ask a question can get into the queue. Greg Stroman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to this very austere group for all their hard work. Very impressive presentation, very impressive work. I know that you've spent a lot of time on it, and we thank you for that. I did want to just make a comment about, I think it was Ms. Kendall mentioned that this option would be more nimble for us, and we had a situation early on in my term where we needed to fill a vacancy in one of the wards, and we looked at what our options were to do that, and we thought about appointing someone to do that, to fill that vacancy, but then we looked at the state law, which the state law said that we may have a special election, and that's the way we would fill that vacancy. And so we had to have a special election because we weren't allowed to do it by appointment. And that special election cost, I think, upwards of $20,000. And while no one would think that we got Ron Weifenbach, who's worth every penny of it, but the point is that we would have been able to act quicker and less expensively because that particular ward was without full representation for several months. And so I think that that's a clear advantage of the Home Rule Charter. I did have one question that I think I'd like to direct either to Mr. Frankenfelder or Mr. McIntaffer, and that is, would a change to this form of government affect the city's ability to finance by municipal bonds, or would it affect our bond rating, our ability to do that? Thank you.
My short answer is no. I'm not a municipal finance expert, but I don't see anything here that would impair our credit rating.
Similarly, that's not necessarily my area of expertise, but we did not, or in my research, I did not find any evidence that home rule communities have lower bond ratings, lower credit ratings, or any sort of limited ability to access funding. But again, I'm not the most researched in that area.
Bill Evans.
Those of us who went to UNL, Nebraska, we joke about this N saying it stands for knowledge. And that's the way I feel tonight, because tonight it stands for Don't Know Nothing. I have to apologize publicly to all the people I've talked to on the telephone, because I had no idea that this was going to be this extensive. I believed when I voted to study home rule, it would be limited to the study of home rule. I believe city manager is a different question. I believe reducing the size of the council is a different question. I have many favorable responses to the home rule advantages. I believe this acts outside of the scope of what we voted on when we asked for a home rule study. That's my feeling. It's like when you give the person repairing your, headlights, they come back and they've replaced the engine. I feel a little bit stretched. So I'm not going to comment on anything tonight, really. I'm just going to say that I apologize to all you people when I assured you that much of this would not be included in the study. I was incorrect about that, and so I apologize to you all. Thank you.
Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Evans. We've had this conversation, and thank the committee. I mean, I appreciate all the hard work, energy, and effort you guys put into it. I'm familiar with almost all of you, and I know one thing: you're not an average citizen. You're lawyers, engineers, doctorates, those types of things, and you're very qualified to sit on a committee, have a good conversation. I came in late, like was mentioned earlier. Yeah, there's provisions. There's not a lot of differences in a lot of things. I'm not going to get into any of those comments, but I do want to make some comments about what I read tonight. I've kept my mouth shut about this whole process, and I don't want to disconcern any of the work that the committee did, because you guys are awesome. You're very professional. Your presentation was spot on, honest. I had done a lot of research about home rule myself, so I'm very knowledgeable of it. But I'm also very knowledgeable of mostly Robert's Rules of Order, because of a full day with Ms. Viking that I don't think any of you all want to do. If you want to learn Robert's Rules of Order, she's the one that can do it. I'm also concerned about low voter turnout, all those types of things that the mayor presented. Okay, but when you make comments such as anger or vitriol from the opposition group, and I can tell you it wasn't me. I respect every one of you, from the lowest person on the totem pole to the angriest person on the totem pole to the nicest guy I've ever met. Average everyday citizens probably in their 20s to 90s. Now, what I have to consider is, in addition to the angry protesters, do we want to subject the committee to an hour-long debate and internal squabble, have public comment, and have that be the controversial takeaway from the meeting? No, we don't want to do that. But I would never make that comment, because every one of you are my constituents at one time or another, and I regard your opinions to the utmost, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. There's a lot of times we can walk away and not agree on things. But when we start these conversations and then we ask the question why we can't get people to vote, why we can't get people to participate in government, you got your answer. But it has nothing to do with the professionalism that this committee put forth. I went back to look and see what Mr. Evans alluded to it. Originally, what he asked the council to do, what they were asked or tasked to do, was approve a committee that would bring the pros and cons of home rule. There was several questions along the way. There was promises made that the citizens would be involved and that the council would be involved, be all public meetings. I understand COVID, but when all of a sudden we talk about transparency and those types of things, it's probably the utmost important thing that we can have was transparency. This is the first that we've gotten of the charter tonight, and I apologize to you guys for that, because it's the first I've seen it. We didn't even know it was coming. We had no idea that we were getting the charter. We thought we were getting pros and cons on home rule so we could weigh out whether we wanted to go to the next step of a charter. So I apologize to the committee for that. I don't know. I came in late, like I said, on a special election. I think the city's got their $30,000 worth out of me and if not, I'll write the check back, but I appreciate what you guys have done, and so just please regard the fact that I'm not angry. I don't think these protesters are angry. I don't think your lives are in danger. There's any problem with that. I think they respect when you bring something and you present it fairly and systematically, and you have a good moderator that presents it. I think that's all very good and well. But when we preference it with this ahead of the time, really makes it hard for me to swallow. I've kept my mouth shut for the entire time I'm on here. I'm done. I'm not going to be silenced anymore. I appreciate what you guys have done. I appreciate you people showing up, not being angry. I know you're not angry. You're voicing your opinion, your First Amendment rights, and this is exactly what everybody would want to do. Thank you.
John Roberts.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to discuss the charter tonight either because of the fact that we, again, just got it. I wish we'd have got it a little bit sooner so we could have actually went through it. I appreciate the committee for everything you've done. I know how difficult it is, and you met a lot, and you met during trying times. I get that. I know that there's a lot of people that were upset because they feel like they were left out of the process. And, you know, myself, I feel that way too, because if you look at the scope of the project, when we voted on it, item 3 in the scope of the project said to assemble a draft home rule charter based on examples from around the state or nation, based on advice or subject matter experts, based on guidelines from the National Civic League or other professional organizations, or based on direct feedback from the citizens, which there wasn't, to include current council members, which there wasn't. We never had any input on this from the beginning, and then we're handed it the very last minute. I mean, that just ticks me off. And if we were voting on it tonight, I would vote purely no just because of that. We should have been part of the process. We should have been informed earlier. And I love one of the last lines on this. This is the original memo before we set up the committee. I am looking forward to the discussion and the, oh no, wait a minute. In a nutshell, the Citizens Committee will be a conduit for the education of current elected or current officials and citizens alike. It wasn't. From the very beginning, it wasn't. We got nothing until now. And that, as an elected official, very much upsets me. So anyway, I look forward to this discussion when we have enough time to actually digest this and talk about it. But until then, I'm done. Thank you.
Carla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel no time limit crunch on this. I mean, we got it now. They got it done now, and we got it now. This is where we start. Now, I'm sure that if any of these council members here would have liked to attend the committee meetings or been informed as to where they were at any time in this process, I'm sure one of these fine people would have taken you aside, taken you to coffee, even during COVID, had a phone call or whatever it would take to keep you abreast of what was going on. Send you some of these things. But it looks to me like none of us asked for it. So I don't think that it's your fault that we didn't ask for it. Now we've got a document in front of us to start with. It's long, it's lengthy. You guys did a lot of work on this, and a lot of things haven't changed that much. But it looks to me like the council will be doing a lot more work, which I don't know if I'm happy about that. Anyway, but we will have a lot more responsibility. We will be talking more to our constituents because that is the way home rule works. So I think that we will be looking at this for a long time. I don't think that we will be saying, okay, we're going to decide on this next month. This is going to take a while to get through. If we decide we want to go the home rule route, we haven't made that decision. We just got this piece. And I thank you for taking the last year to really consider where we might go for the future. We are a growing city. We are on the move in so many ways, and we need a way towards the future. We need to talk to you. We'll talk to you because we'll have to. Can't just go out and make decisions in this particular document without word from our constituents. Did you listen to the presentation? We have to talk to you. So I think that that's a good way forward, but we're going to take our time in this. This is not going to get done maybe in 6 months. I think that that is why we have this off year. We have 3-year terms now. 1 year, we are none of us running for office. We are working on things. Because we don't have to be out raising money, putting up signs, going to forums, doing all these things. And Laura and I do forums with our constituents twice a year. We run it however we can. If we run it on Zoom, if we do it some way, we meet with them anyway. So I'm really quite proud of the work that you guys have done. Your qualifications are incredible, and I just can't think of a better group than this to have brought this forward. You really thought about everything. You really thought about everything, and I don't think that's a detriment. I think that's very much in your favor and in ours. So I'm going to look at this, and I might look at it for a long time because, frankly, there's a lot that I'll have to think about. Is it right or is it wrong? Should we be overseeing some of the departments? I don't know. Council's never done that before. Do we do that? Do we put our 2 cents worth in? Yes, we do. We talk to the mayor. We talk to him about things. But now it's up to us if we go with this. I don't know. Do I want to go in and talk to the water department and decide what they're doing? I don't know. You know? So this will take a while. This will take some thought and some consideration, maybe even a year, just like you took. Without COVID, with us being able to meet and really decide where we're going to go in the future. Because home rule, I think, gives everybody a voice. And I know that that's not what a lot of you think. I can see some heads wagging out there. But I think if you guys take this home and really have a look at it, read it, and think about who you're going to get up here in this council and how you're going to be interacting with them, really think about it. If we get 19% voters, yuck, it's embarrassing, you know? So if you think about this and, you know, get your friends and say, it's time for us to vote. And then you'll have a say, okay? But right now, we struggle to get people to run. We struggle to get people to stay. And it's up to you guys. It's up to this city to change that. So, you know, if you want to just say no, that's fine. But please vote. So you get the people up here that will try to bring this city forward. Because we've been operating under the same rules for too darn long. Thank you.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. That's going to be a hard act to follow. Thank you, Alderwoman Drew. And I also want to thank the committee and also the honorable mention that I got in one of the articles from Linda Lee. So thank you for the honorable mention in that. So yes, I do pay attention to it. I hope we can have some more discussion, public dialogue, and because as stated earlier, that several of us got this just a few hours ago. And I would like to have a chance to process through, and if we have at least 1 or 2 more opportunities for dialogue, Q&A, back and forth, so I can have a chance to review and study this information that was provided to us tonight. And I didn't know what version we were going to be getting tonight because I knew there was a lot of variations and variables that could be attributed to the Home Rule Charter.
And so it's going to take me a little time to process this through. I've been working very hard on a couple of other major documents that the city is going to be coming up with. So most of my time has been spent analyzing all of those documents, and now this is just what I call adding to the bigger plate with now it's getting sideboards on it. So I don't mind that challenge. So hopefully we'll get that chance and opportunity to have further public discussions on these items. And Mayor, thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and I yield back.
Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and first and foremost, I do want to give my respect and appreciation to the committee for all your work. I know it is a lot of sacrifice and it's a lot to take on. This is not an easy topic. Please know that we appreciate you. Also appreciate all the citizens who are attending, who are watching online, for being engaged in the process. I think it's a testament that people do actually care about this city. And my big question, and I don't know if it's a representative from the committee or maybe it's the mayor, but the big question I have, and I've mentioned this before, is what significant problem does this solve for us? What's the big, I know being nimble and, you know, those sorts of things, but the people weren't the ones asking for this. It was you and perhaps your circle of friends asking for it. Was there a significant problem that you saw that led you down this road?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think the problem that I saw is the pattern of the lack of interest of people seeking public office. So we're bound to have 10 council members, for example. Now, if you can put any trust in what other communities say, I've talked to citizens and council members who were on the city council prior to home rule and on the city council after home rule. And there were some concerns about, for example, the resizing of the city council. Without exception, every single one of them said it has increased the cooperation, the teamwork, the quality of the individuals running for office has improved. It's professionalized their city and their dialogue. And in fact, in the cities that I talk to, the number one most stated benefit is the resizing of the city council. And so the other issues are that I think are very important is that we can place things on the ballot rather than take action on them here on something that's especially large or controversial, or we can put that on the ballot. During the arena issue, we were being accused of lying that when we stated we couldn't put that on the ballot. We had to take action on it and have it referred. That was a requirement of law. And so that creates this, I think, unhealthy environment between us and the constituents. So the flexibility is a great benefit. Some of the benefits on the most common benefits stated were that home rule requires you to give up nothing, but only gain the ability to respond to something that the state has not yet seen as a priority. So that is just increases our options for what we don't know is around the corner in the future. So, and what else was there to your question?
Well, it's just a significant problem that this was going to solve.
Yeah, there's no significant problem like we're in a bind and we need to become home rule so that we can fix it. That doesn't exist.
Right. Because there are reasons I've heard cities go to home rule for a variety of reasons. One wanted I think a utility they wanted to bring into town, and state law prohibited it at the time. There might be all sorts of reasons. It seems like the big reason for us is really the structure of our government is the main catalyst. And that's also, I think, my biggest opposition, and it's not shy. The business side of me, there are things in here that really appeal to the efficiency and the productivity and doing things in a clean way. And there's a part of me that says I like that on the business side of me. The American in me, which is even stronger. I think, when governing, it's good to be pragmatic, but not at the expense of our principles. And the principle that I have a challenge with in this is the distribution of power versus the concentration of power. And I think by reducing the amount of representation of the people and removing the direct choice of the executive by the people, we actually tilt the scales towards the concentration of power. And that and it is philosophical. This is not a pragmatic. The pragmatic part of me gets it. I get it. Even then, I don't get it because it's a hard enough job with 2 people from each ward to even stay engaged, let alone put it on the shoulders of 1 person from each ward. And I promise you, you run for office, which I guarantee we have just motivated a whole lot of people to run for office. They will understand the sheer amount of work that we do, and a lot of it. And I respect all members of the council, regardless of our differing opinions. I know they work hard. I know all of them are up here for the right reasons, even the ones I don't always agree with. I know that their intentions are to work hard and they serve their constituents. It's a lot of work. So even just pragmatically speaking, you've never served on council, how we are currently set up and what the expectations are of our community, and maybe it's our level of commitment, but I've always been impressed with every council I've served with. They've worked hard. They're good people. I respect the mayor, believe it or not. I don't agree with him on some things. I disagree with him on the public comment. We fought to get it back, some of us, and it is back. By the way, those of you who might have been confused by an earlier comment, you will have an opportunity to speak. I think the mayor will lay that out, but we wanted to make sure the public's heard. So, if we were to vote tonight, it would be a hard pass for me. But we will research it. I haven't read through it. We got it all just a few hours before the meeting tonight, and trying to get off of work and read through it. We haven't fully read through it, so tonight is kind of the first night I've had a chance to kind of process it. But for me, it really is, what problems does it solve and which ones do they possibly create? And, those are things for us to consider as we go through this. And this by no means diminishes the work that it took. But for me, it's going to be hard to get over that. All about local control, but I think there's something to be said about state government helping us out, and our relationship with state government could be vastly improved as well. So there's an ownership on our part with state government to make sure that we can address these things, such as how we fill special elections and those sorts of things. We have work to do. So for me, that's kind of what it boils down to. I get it on a pragmatic standpoint, but at the end of the day, you have to stand on principles in life and in government. You believe in something, and for me, I believe in distribution of power. 50 states are good. Nations are good. It is never good. 3 branches of government are good. It's good to have an executive branch that you elect and a legislative branch that you elect with a judicial branch to help us sort it all out. That's the way the founders intended it. I know it's allowed. I know other cities do it. Good for them. That's great. For me in Rapid City, I'm elected here right now to tell you I'm not compelled to do it. There are elements in here, though, I think we could use to tweak what we currently do, and certainly open to those conversations. But to go to home rule, change the city managers, reduce the amount of representation, hard pass. Thank you.
Okay, I hope the council keeps in mind that the charter that was presented tonight is now yours. Yours to edit, yours to delete sections, add sections. If there's a part you don't like, you can change it. This is the sample charter. This is the charter that this group came up with. The things that, and there, I think Linda Lee is going to clarify what I just said here, but
No.
It's yours. And if you can't get comfortable with it, then you don't move it forward. But also, the council's got plenty of travel budget available. They could either travel to some of these cities to talk to those cities, or we could use some of that to bring city representatives in here to answer questions.
But the thing that I have a hard time with is that, well, yeah, sure, it works in these cities, but it wouldn't work here because we're different. And I think that it's that type of thinking that holds us back a little bit. I think just the fact that we're exploring this as an option and it has created such a reaction, you know, this is an idea. We had an exchanging of ideas tonight. And all of this, none of this is mandatory. If you don't want to, you never have to see this again. Or if you want to take some time and edit and bring it back in a different form, then you can do that. But I would ask you, maybe beg you, not to completely disregard this because of some of the false information that is being spread, because of some of the assumptions that have had to be made because we didn't share this before it was finished. All of that type of thing, I think, sets a negative stage for us. And if it's going to close our eyes and ears and close our minds to anything change-oriented, I think I'm even more worried than before. So, Linda Lee, would you like to clarify what I said?
No, I would like to, first of all, thank the council. We appreciate your comments. But I also want to reiterate on behalf of the committee that we're with you on the need for public hearings. And we were sorry we were not able to provide that. And we completely think that they should happen. But I also want to suggest to you that having a recommendation to work from and having a charter to work from is also helpful to the public. Because otherwise, if I say to you, I want you to have home rule, you're going to say to me, well, what does that mean? What are the details of that? So that's what we did. We put together the details for you to work from. So I think that's actually an advantage to these public hearings that are coming up, instead of kind of guessing what it might mean or how it might look. So hopefully that also will be of assistance to you. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you. And since Linda Lee brought up the public hearings, I'll just take a step back and say this started, the council's first contact from me about this the official contact would have been in November 2019. That's when I wrote the memo that Mr. Roberts was reading from. And the memo, by the way, I believe explains the scope of the study. I don't think there's any vagueness there in that memo. But that memo was written, came to you before the word COVID was in our vocabulary. So as those details were laid out in that memo, that's exactly what we planned to do, was to use this committee to have a series of in-person public meetings where people could come and watch, where the council members could come and go as they chose. And then almost immediately after our first introductory meeting, all that changed. So now we've reverted to a Zoom format. So in the last year, and by the way, this extended the timeline of this probably by a good 6 months. It drug this out many months longer than I'd anticipated. And in the event the council was to have chosen to vote on this in 2021, I had budgeted for a special election in that event. So this was planned to be handled in 2021. The time frame was definitely lengthened by the pandemic. So it was determined that we would reverse the process then. We would have the committee work and the presentation, and then go back out with public hearings, town hall meetings, interaction with anyone who wanted to interact on the subject. And that has made it clunky, but I can't apologize for that because it was out of our control. And I suppose what I could have done was, as soon as we decided we were going to Zoom, I could have anticipated all the difficulties ahead, and I could have rewritten a memo and said, ignore the November one, here's the new deal. I didn't do that. But I do meet with the a super majority of this council at least once a month. I have been asked about it. I have provided information about it. But if you heard my presentation in the beginning, I only knew generally what was being addressed at any given week. I did not have a feel for how it was going. In fact, when Jordan Mason was trying to pin me down to a deadline back in February, I took a guess because it seemed to me from listening to the committee that they were getting pretty close. So I took a guess, and that was wrong. In fact, this charter, the final version of the charter, I believe was only sent back out to the committee members a couple of days ago. So there's been work on this all the way up to the finish line. So it's inconvenient, might be uncomfortable, but it is far from a scam to keep the people in the dark, to shove something down someone's throat, or any other nefarious activity. This was a set of circumstances that we tried to adapt to, and the result was we got people concerned about it. So there will be public presentations, public feedback, council feedback. There can be editing sessions, consensus building, at some point, a decision point. And there's no timeline for that decision point. I did attend the committee meeting just the other night, maybe it was that last night, and it was determined in that meeting that when this council meeting's over and things have kind of calmed down, that we would get back together as a committee and discuss the steps moving forward. So this is happening in real time, and I am now engaging with this committee because I don't have to worry about giving them some undue influence in it. So I can't explain it to everyone's liking because it just happened the way it happened. But that's where we're at today. Anything further, Mr. Solomon?
No, sir. That'll do it for now.
Thank you.
I would just, let me just add, I was thinking, we had council meetings during this whole time. We had all sorts of activities happening the last several months at least. We could have made arrangements just beginning of this year, realistically, because we kept meeting in person. So it's not completely honest to say that we couldn't. We could have just later than we wanted to. And I'm not trying to...
Can you just go back and repeat the last thing, please?
Yeah, so to say that it was clunky, I would agree. COVID did complicate things. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns. But business did keep going. We did continue to meet in person. We tried to have a impromptu Q&A session with you at a council meeting, which I do give you credit for taking on those questions. But we could have had updates from members then, that maybe that's something we could have done. But they could have met in public at that time with some people zooming in if they weren't comfortable. And with the notices going out to the public to be a part of it or to listen in or whatever the case may be. I think for a few months you get the excuse, but after that we kept things going, and there was a way even for it to be streamed, those conversations, without comments or whatever maybe, but definitely the last several months certainly could have had that input. So I just wanted to rebut that part. I would give you that initial part, but I think we could have done a better job. And we've said that too. I mean, we've talked about this. This is not new, but a lot of us felt in the dark, and I didn't know what this was going to contain until today. So today's the first time I knew 7-person council. I could only speculate before. But I could have known that ahead of time and had a more intelligent conversation. So.
And I'll accept that, but I just want to say that goes both ways. I happen to have a whole bunch of other projects that have kept me underwater since I got here, but especially in the last year. So I have not proactively reached out on many of those, and especially where I'm keeping an arm's length from this committee. I have talked to several of you and said they're still working. I think they must be getting close. I wanted that determination from them to be sterilized. Yes, I could have asked them to come to city council meetings. Didn't think of it. But I
And
don't
for
think
our
it's.
part- For our part, we could have asked, you know, I was elected during the middle of all this too. I didn't initiate, so I didn't want to have undue influence on these folks either, because I had to state my opinion during the campaign. So what do? Go and bring my opinion in with these folks. So I understand that, but I think at some point we could have, the lesson learned is we should over communicate rather than under communicate. We could have at least had something going, and that runs both ways. I mean, for sure. I yield.
All right. Pat Jones.
Thank you very much, Mayor. When this committee was formed, I had the honor of being part of the committee. I was on the committee from the very beginning, and I want to underscore what an awesome committee it was. There's 18 people sitting in the room. 17 of them were amazing, and I was the 18th person. What a fantastic group of people, and I commend the work that you all did. We had one meeting in person, and then, as has been said, everything else went to Zoom. And the research that was done, the tasks we were asked to do in between meetings, to read and be ready to go, it was amazing. So an awful lot of work has been done. And it is a blue ribbon committee, Mayor. I will very much agree with you. So thank you all for the work that you did. It's amazing, and it is a fantastic how-to to go to home rule. As I've talked with people about this recently, the same question keeps coming up, and Councilman Salmon touched on it a bit, is why? Why are we doing this? What is wrong right now that we need to fix? You know, there's never been a time like it is right now. COVID has changed everything, and I know that's a mundane thing to say almost at this point, but it truly changed that process, and it truly changed how everyone in this room and everyone watching feels about government. I feel differently about government now than I did before COVID. And people will call me and say, well, I don't trust what you guys are doing. I say, I don't blame you. I don't trust what we're doing either. So there's got to be some trust built back into what we do, into what you do, into what our other elected officials do, before we take on something as gigantic as this. And the people who have talked to me, and I so appreciate hearing from them, that's what they're telling me, is we need to have trust in our government again. We need to believe in our government again. Everything from little old city council all the way up to Washington, D.C. And so how do we build that trust back? It's not by doing something as radical as this without everybody that wants to know being on board. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. A few people stopped me outside as I was coming in, and, you know, this is bad, this, you know, and God bless them. I love hearing what they have to say. But I didn't know. I didn't know what my thoughts were on this. I may have been, you know, I felt I was well informed on it from my time on the group and my personal study and research, but I don't know if it's a good fit for Rapid City. And I still don't. But there has to be time given for anyone who wants to know to study it, to ask questions, and we have to have that as we move forward. I believe Councilman Drew said that there's no time clock ticking on this thing, and we have plenty of time to study it. And that's what we have to do. No one should feel rushed that this has got to get done. There shouldn't be a timeline. It should be if we want to do it, when we want to do it, if it's comfortable, because we will vote first, and then if we vote in favor of it, the way I understand, then it would go to a vote of the public. And I'm not ready to vote tonight. If it were a vote tonight, it'd be an easy vote. I would vote no way, because there's way too many things we don't know. We being all of y'all, wherever you are, hi, how are you? And everyone involved. We have a lot of things we need to know. It may be wonderful, and I totally respect what the mayor has done on this. He mentioned it in 2015, in 2017, in 2019. The world was a whole different place at that time. People believed more. They trusted more. They were willing to go with things like that. I sat right up here when the urban chicken thing came up. And I said, you know, I could support it sometime, but not right now. It's not a good idea. And that's kind of what I feel about this. I think this has a lot of merit, but we've got to put a lot of time in to study it and see what it's going to do, and anyone who wants to be part of the process needs to be. And then, and only then, should it come to a vote of this body, and then whatever we do will impact what the citizens do. But this cannot be rushed or pushed or anything. The pace has to be comfortable. And again, thank you to everyone on the committee for the great work that you did. It was an honor to be part of you for 2 months and 3 days, or whatever at the time I was there. And Mayor, I appreciate the fact that you have brought this forward too, because we won't know unless we go through this process. Growth is difficult and hard, but we need to do this to see. And we'll know by the end of this process, by the time we voted and everyone's had their say, if this is a good idea or not. And we'll be able to move forward peacefully and know that we did it together. It's not us against you or we against they or spy against spy, if you ever read Mad Magazine. It's us. Period. Thank you.
Laura Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you, Home Rule Committee. I really appreciate everything that you did, the sacrifices you made. Thank you. Being from Ward 5, I've got 5 questions. The first one is a hypothetical. Is there anything wrong with exploring options? Because that's what we're doing. We do something different. Doesn't hurt to explore those options. If Henry Ford didn't invent a car, we'd still be riding horses. If the Wright brothers didn't see that vision for planes, we'd still be walking or riding horses. Second question, is there something wrong when someone gives a direction and then that person or that group goes above and beyond? Ms. Viken, you said you were a teacher. Did you ever punish your students if they did more than what was assigned? Mr. Evans, did you ever punish your students if you told them, I want you to learn 3 blind mice, and they came back to you with Beethoven's 5th Symphony? Mr. Roberts, if you had a house and said, just leave it as is.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. If she's going to pick out each council member and start criticizing them, then they should be able to respond. Thank you.
I'm not criticizing. That's not criticism. And I will reclaim my time, sir. Thank you so much. Nothing's wrong with going above and beyond, and I thank you for doing that, because you didn't get paid for this. And you did this while navigating COVID. Third question I have. Was this charter and or the preamble, was this unique and created, or did you get that from a template? Did you get it from a certain city, or was this an original document? That's to any of you. And asking this question, I'm not criticizing, just for the record.
Linda Lee Viken.
Kind of some of each. We did look at models that have been created by organizations who specialize in the area of home rule. We also looked at what was in the ones in South Dakota. So I can't tell you exactly whether we took it exactly or whether we revised it a little bit, but we liked it.
Kind of like making a recipe. You have a recipe and then you kind of make it your own. I cook like that all the time. Thank you. My fourth question for the Home Rule Committee. Did you receive any public input? Did the members get feedback, like in your own circles of friends? There's a website where questions were submitted. There was a frequently, so did you have that opportunity?
Yes, when asked, we did do some presentations. I spoke to the Rotary. We had a little focus group of people we invited. This was before COVID. And so we got some input from them. Some of our other members also were requested to do a presentation, and they did. Basically what they did is kind of take our PowerPoint
Little bit of public.
So it wasn't, yeah, so it wasn't as strong as this was tonight, or as detailed as this tonight.
Okay.
But I think there were 4 or 5.
Okay. So a little bit of public input. Okay, good. Any interaction on the website? I think there were places where you could submit questions, or they're frequently asked.
There were a number of questions submitted.
Oh, so we
and
did have public input. Good, okay.
Those were answered either by the committee members or by city attorney or myself.
Great, okay. And then my 5th question is, what are the next steps? Will the Home Rule Committee be providing forums? You mentioned public hearings. And would you be available if council members had questions in reviewing this charter that we just received?
Our appointment expired on May 4th.
Okay.
And so I don't know that we have the actual authority to call public meetings, but I know that our members would be very happy to answer questions or be involved to the extent that you would like us to be.
If I picked up the phone and gave you a call and said, could you clarify that, dumb it down for me a little bit, I don't understand it, you'd be able to explain that?
We'd be happy to do that. I don't know, I didn't poll them, but now I've just told them we'd be happy to do that.
And one last comment. Over the last year, I did reach out. We can be proactive, and I think all of you know that I'm proactive. And when I saw Ed McLaughlin, full disclosure, I didn't want to influence him. I would say, how's the home rule thing going? And they say, well, with this COVID and the technical difficulties and the Zooms and the this, that, and the other, but it's going really well. And my main question is everybody communicating effectively? Is everybody being respectful? And he said yes. And I did that, I want to say, maybe 2 or 3 times over the last year. And I don't think anybody needed permission. That's our job. So thank you. I will yield.
Okay, and to reiterate what I'd said earlier, we will be having a debriefing with the committee members who wish to attend to find out if any of them are interested in any next steps, and we'll start developing a plan at that point. John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I was just going to ask about those next steps and just a procedural question. Since the committee is expired, if we bring them forward to do presentations or whatever, I would imagine the committee will have to be reappointed, correct?
I doubt that's the case. There's still a group of citizens. The question would be, I think the question within the question, let me know if I'm right, is that if there's some funding needed for facilitating public input, if that came from the city, I would suspect then it would need to be vetted by the council. But again, I don't think this committee needs to be reappointed to do anything as citizens. We may just hold public town hall meetings for questions, answers, and the PowerPoint presentation, but it hasn't been decided yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Greg Stroman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a quick point. I don't want anyone that's watching this or anyone that's here to think or get the impression that the mayor has held back anything from any member of the city council who had the gumption to go up and ask him what's going on. I have never not received a call back or a text back or a response from the mayor almost immediately. And if you want to know what's going on, ask the mayor what's going on. Don't come to the meeting later and say, gee, I don't know what's going on, so I'm against it. You have the responsibility, especially those of you who are more experienced council members, to go in there and ask the questions. And if you don't do it, don't come in here and try to paint the mayor as the bad guy, because he's not. He's doing his best for the city. He's doing this because he wants to see if we can improve the city. And if you don't want to improve the city, or if you don't think that this is an improvement, then you can just vote that way. I'm done. Thank you.
Bill Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now that I've gone through the shock and my expression of guilt, I guess I'm technically, Laura, in stage 3 of my grieving process, but I just wanted to say, out of this 16-page document, there's only one page that I believe even pertains to home rule, and it's Article 1 on the first page. The rest is, again, an overextension of authority into the committee, and I've numerous council meetings expressed the extension of authority beyond what I think people have, whether it's tearing down pieces of infrastructure on downtown streets or renaming, facilities in the city that were passed by ordinance of the city council. So I have a couple questions here, and I don't know who could answer. Perhaps Mr. Jones, at what point was the expansion of this task force, gone beyond just the home rule thing, like I say, page 1, into a complete restructuring of the city government? Because to me, that's a big step beyond the authority. Were you around when that took place?
I can answer that. Part of the materials that were provided to the committee were a guide on investigating home rule. And the home rule charter guide leads a committee like this through the process of discovering home rule. Home rule is not home rule without a charter. The charter is not a charter without articulating who's going to be in charge and what authority the city council has, and if there's a mayor, or what form of management. All of those are part of home rule. So if we were to discuss only the philosophical pros and cons of looking into home rule, I think that was accomplished with the memo that I sent you guys. But I don't believe this is an overextension of their authority. I believe this is exactly what was expected of them. And I think the memo that I sent out in November clearly states that. So I don't believe they've done anything that they should not have done.
Mayor, well, I guess I'm not accusing them of that, but what I'm saying is it's the first page here that could have been attached to our current, city charter, just making that change to home rule. And this is a revamping of everything. So I do see that as beyond the scope. I'm sorry, I feel that way, because one of 16 pages pertains to home rule. The rest could have been exactly as we have it now. So my other question is...
Well, Mr. Evans, you asked me a question.
Okay.
So may I please respond to Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Since he directed it specifically at me, he threw the Don Frankenfeld pie directly at me, so I'm going to respond. At our very first meeting, and only in-person meeting, we bantered a great deal about, is home rule, do you have to have a city manager to have home rule? What's the difference between city manager and city administrator? Do you have to have one to have the other? What's the difference between a strong mayor and a weak mayor? We bantered about all of those things to even get the ball rolling. So all of those elements were part of the discussion from day one. And how did they fit into the process or not? So that's why those things are all part of this.
Okay,
because
well, I understand
they had
that.
to be. They had to be. It'd be like building a crust without talking about Crisco. They all had to be included. And I know I asked the question to get clarity several times about why are we discussing city manager? And it took them a while to convince me the difference between a weak mayor and a strong mayor. But I got it. And it made sense as to why. And so another question that was asked was, well, when we come forward with whatever recommendation we have, can we recommend, yes, we think home rule is good or bad, and then also, do we think a city manager is good or bad, or do we think a city administrator is good or bad? And that answer was, yes, we can come and recommend anything we want or nothing we want.
And you don't
that
see
was the
that
part
as an
of
extension.
the process.
See, I see that as beyond the scope of the question.
It's
And I
not,
really do.
because it was what the group was tasked to do. They were tasked
no.
to investigate all elements of it.
Well,
and it
we'll
is an element
disagree
of it.
because you're not going to convince me, but I have another question for
Well, I'm
the
not
members
trying to
of the
convince you. I'm
panel.
answering your question.
And Mr. Mayor answered it, Mr. Jones, so you didn't need to answer it twice.
Well, you directed it at me.
Okay, but he stepped in and you allowed him to. Thank you. Now, we used to have city manager form of government in Rapid City. How many of you people on that committee are aware of this? All of you. Did you bother to interview some of the 85-plus-year-old people that experienced the problems we had with the city manager form of government years ago? I'm just curious because I have.
I would not say that we have interviewed them, but we did read the articles about it, and Ed McLaughlin brought us up to speed on that because he was aware of that.
Okay, do we have access to any of that sort of study so we can look at that data at all? I mean,
it was basically the information that the Journal had printed, and I'd have to see what else we have, but I'd be happy to make them available to you.
Okay, yeah, I'd personally like to see it because I've been told that in the 50s, we had a major problem getting rid of the city manager. And we had a problem getting rid of the city manager because evidently the council was very cozy with that manager. And it's been expressed to me, and I don't know if it's true, I can only believe what people tell me, like, you know, setting up this committee, that it was hard until they got the city council replaced to get rid of that manager. And that is my concern about this overstepping, because I see this as an exact example of what people are concerned about. We give this much authority, but then somehow along the period of the last year, it became a way bigger authority. And then I'm presented at 11 o'clock this morning with this document. And like I said, I'm very sorry that I've been defending what is now indefensible. I did not know it would contain all of this. So I apologize for being so ignorant of to what was going on. But I do really consider this a step beyond the question, and I think we need to stay within our bounds, and maybe you think I'm out of bounds now, but I think the question is asked, what is home rule, good or bad? Not the complete restructuring of our city government. Thank you.
Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think that we've gone beyond a presentation, and I know that we've allotted some time for some public input, so if everybody's on the council's said what they said, I think we could probably move on.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the council, we could go to general public comment. This is how we'll take general public comment tonight. We did not leave out the public speaker forms tonight. We're just going to have you line up if you wish to speak. We are going to hold public comment tonight to 30-minute time periods for proponents and 30-minute to opponents. So first of all, are there any proponents, people in favor of home rule that would like to speak first who are not committee members? If not, we could go straight to the opponents. So 3 minutes each, up to 30 minutes, so that'll be how it's handled tonight.
Mayor, Council, Jordan Mason here. Thank you for the time. As Linda Lee Viken just clearly stated, and I greatly appreciate it, there is no committee. Let me reiterate that. There is no legal committee. It expired on May 4th, right? So you've just given 3.5 hours to the proponents. These are private citizens, and I appreciate their hard work. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, because I think it's important, I do want to also just reiterate that first point. This council will have to have a private council member take this item to make a legal action on this, right? Otherwise, this is a private citizen making a recommendation to you and asking you to move forward with something, right? Again, there's no city committee. Number two, you know, I've heard this repeatedly. You said, you know, we want to give them time. There was time and there was a clock, and the clock has passed, right? The other thing that I think that is important is how you bake the pie matters, right? I've openly said this to the mayor. I will keep saying it. This was mishandled, right? You sent a very mixed message. You say this is our committee, this is our meeting, when at first you say we don't even have the right to speak on our government, and then you refer to your own citizens today in the Journal as protesters and imply that these elderly people that put you in office may become violent. Now, I will say, am I angry at that? Absolutely. I think that's indefensible. You don't refer to your constituents as a public servant who you're supposed to serve as people that are going to attack you. That is reprehensible. Right? Number 3, city manager, I've been saying this for a year. When you say this is for the people, that does not mean an indefinite appointment and allow you to move out of the city, or I should say, as it's written under Section 3, to move out of the city. I'm sorry, I forgot that you may not take that position, but you have bought a house just north of me in Meade County. But allow somebody that doesn't even live in the city, right, to be our city manager and have an indefinite appointment. That's not accountability. That's not for the people. That's absolutely, unquestionably self-serving as a political operative. Number 4, reduce the council of 6. Let me be clear. If you guys have any self-preservation politically for your own aspirations, 4 of you are going to get fired if you vote for this. Right? Read it. This is clearly the intentions in one of the largest power grabs I've ever seen in the city. Ever. Right? And lastly, I will just, well, I'll get right to the last point. Well, there's 2 points that I really want to make. One, there is one reading for emergency ordinances. I warned about that as well. And lastly, I think it's fair to say when you hire your campaign trasher after giving 2 facilitators to facilitate this committee, and you give one of them a contract and only pay the one that was your campaign treasurer, yes, there's a conflict of interest. Yes, it was unbecoming. And absolutely, it was wrong and immoral. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, thank y'all for your time. My name is William Wagner. I'm the chairman of Black Hills Veteran Advocacy, Mental Health and Wellness. I'm fully assembled to the state and the capital and my county. I have 2 things. Section 901, Section A. Was that a misprint of peoples or is it for the people? Is one. Section 901A. Yeah, look at it. Peoples is for the incorporation. Okay? 901A says for the peoples, and I asked the people if that was for a misprint, because for the peoples is for the incorporation, not for the people. And also, another thing, I say, Captain, over there, please listen. Under Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of color of rights, as of May 4th, this is all a charade. Right now, this is a charade. This is very, very, very illegal, and I think y'all need to stop this now. This is a whole charade, and thank y'all for your time.
Hi, my name is Casey Giardino. I was just alarmed about the emergency ordinance that could be extended indefinitely. I don't think that's a good idea, and I don't think you guys should have the authority to do that. I mean, if the state government could do that, we're responsible enough citizens to know when an emergency is happening. You know what I mean? Just get rid of that completely. Thank you.
My name is Tantia Weaver, and I'm speaking for myself tonight, but I could probably speak for Citizens for Liberty as well. I just want you to know that we realize that home rule is not a new idea, and when we heard that there was going to be a commission or a committee, I guess, that seems to have morphed into a task force assigned to study it, what we were really expecting was, rather than a charter proposed, is an analysis. It seems kind of like a bait and switch. I grew up in a town that had a commission system, and I am curious, if we're going to study forms of government, why not study also the commission system? There are some cities with commissions that have city managers and some that don't. Maybe that's another worthy thing to look at. But it seems that this was a focus on home rule and home rule alone. I don't know what powers or authority you want that you don't have or that you think you need that you don't have. But those are questions that could be asked as well. The draft proposal basically says this is what's on the table, vote yes or no. And I think that that's moving a little bit too fast. I know that many people mentioned the word efficiency, and I will just say that history is replete with efficient regimes. There might be a reason to slow things down, and I don't agree that it's impossible to get things done in Pierre. I think that it just takes a little more effort, and I would encourage you to take what you heard tonight from your council members and the people here. And by the way, I don't think any of us are really angry, at least on this side. So I would agree with the characterization of the public as being angry for simply exercising their rights was probably a misstep. So with that, I'll bid you good evening. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Bob Horsley, and I've never spoken at a forum like this before, but I am a business owner. And I sit back and I see this home rule come up, and it looks like it's trying to be put in place to be a solution to all our problems. I think first we gotta, and if it means dropping home rule, that's what we have to do. But we have to step back, and as a business owner, what I've had to do many times when I try to solve everything at once, it usually ends up in disaster. We need to step back, identify the problem that we want to solve, then work on that problem. If it's a problem, we need someone to more control of all these individual departments in the city, well, then you maybe look at someone in that management position, but to go in and change our whole type of government and everything, I'm just saying step back and identify the problem before you go out to solve it. And then I also heard that there wasn't enough people involved in that type of stuff. There's 100 people out there tonight, and I guarantee they're going to be involved down the road. And so, and if this keeps coming up again and again, I sit there and I feel like we're talking, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Geez, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep bringing this up and shoving it at our face till they dwindle us down, wear us away, we're wore out, and then it gets put through on some other night? That's what I felt like. And like I say, this is my first time talking to you guys ever. But that's my opinion. I am a businessman, and then, so I think this home rule is the wrong approach. Step back and identify your problem before you try and do something. If that means step back, identify it, and stop this. I mean, you got some great people that were working on this. I feel it was a no-win scenario. But that's all I got.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I had some carefully prepared notes because I thought we were going to speak at the beginning, and now that we're speaking at the end, I want to be careful that I'm not repeating things that other people have already said. There's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and I'm not sure I heard at any time tonight what's really broken that we're addressing that would be fixed by home rule. One of the things, Mr. Mayor, when you started out, back here at the podium, you talked about a problem of low voter turnout, and I agree. I've done all I can in my neighborhood to instill people to get off their butts and get out and vote. I spent 26 years in uniform, and I think it's our civic duty to vote. It's not a right or a privilege. We have an obligation. So I've been schooling people. I started a neighborhood watch group, and they hear politics from me all the time as I try to bring them up to speed on why it's important to get out and vote. But you also talked about distrust of local government, and Mr. Mayor, I'll say it, I can only speak for myself. I don't trust you. And I don't trust some of those rubber stamp yes people who sit up there where I sat long ago. And I didn't hear anything tonight that was going to address, I kept hearing the voice of the people, but if the people don't vote and they don't exercise their voice, there is no voice. And I didn't hear anything that was proposed as to how that would be fixed. I heard a smaller city council, concentration, and thank you, Jason, for your comments. I agree wholeheartedly. I think we need 10 council members up there because it brings a better contrast and a better, it forces people into teamwork. It was said it was a conservative's dream. I'm against this. I don't mind saying so, and I'm going to be a hard sell to get me to try to change my mind until I hear something that just makes sense. And right now, to me, it doesn't make sense. And the one thing I have an extreme amount of trouble with is there was a chart up there that showed a city manager form of government, and it showed that the city manager, the city attorney, and the city finance officer would report to. And when you say report to, that tells me those people are their boss. They would report to the mayor and the city council. So suddenly, Joel sitting over there and Pauline sitting over there are going to have 7 bosses. It's untenable, absolutely untenable. It defies a single line of authority, and that in and of itself cannot work. And at the risk of going farther and being disjointed, I'll just end right there. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Connie Fenenga, and I want to thank Jason Solomon, Ron Weifenbach, Pat Jones, and Mr. Evans and Mr. Roberts for giving some clarity to this and saying, we have no information. You want us to make a decision on no information once again. Bill Evans said it very clearly. This is overextension of authority with no information. In the information age of internet, why don't we have this in our palms, in our brains, plenty of time ahead of time? Mayor Allander, if I heard you correct, you said the benefit would be the flexibility is of great benefit. Well, I don't want our government to be so darn flexible where we, the taxpayers, are the target. And who and what is wrong with what is the subject of the wrong here, and what are we addressing? So, thank you for standing up for us taxpayers, and thanks for, having some heart and morality to this. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jody Fry. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but I wanted to say no. Please vote no. Not tonight, but if this comes up again, or like the mayor offered, we don't ever have to see this again. And I would love that, because all this is doing is taking away our voices. We have 2 representatives now, we're going to go down to 1. And we know who's going to get elected because you know where the money's going to be. And I have a question, Mayor, I'm going to ask you. We all know you built a house out of town. Do you plan on running for city manager or being appointed city manager?
Okay, normally we wouldn't take, I'm going to stop your time. Normally we wouldn't take questions during this time because that's not what this is for, but I'm going to answer that question.
Thank you.
I will not in any way, shape, or form show an interest. I think any of these folks up here can tell you, I've voiced the same thing to them. I believe I will not qualify. And not a single person up here would call me a good old boy that they're going to put in here if I don't qualify. There's no reason to think that. And that has been pure speculation and suspicion, and it's wrong.
Okay, well, that's on the record. I just want to make sure that you don't plan on being city manager and have an appointment coming down the road.
Mayor for life, right?
We have enough of that. Term limits. Anyways, I just want to thank you all for your time. I appreciate, Bill, you nailed it for a lot of us out here. I know we're on different sides of the spectrum, but you nailed it. We appreciate John, Ron, Jason, Pat, you even saying no, it's a no pass. Thank you very much, and please let us have some input. We all waited 3.5 hours to speak, and we're always at the end. We're the last ones you want to hear from. We know that. We're not angry protesters. We're tired protesters who want to go home and have dinner. So thank you.
Okay, it appears the public speakers are done, and Laura Armstrong just made a motion to adjourn. Second by Stroman. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.